Welcome back to my garage. I've managed to fend off my lust for experimentation and complex problem solving, and we're back to basics with my PIP engine. Not supercharged, not on nitromethanol. We're going to fix some issues. Last time it seemed like we destroyed the main bearings. We're going to tear it down and have a look, see what happened. Last time I said I was going to move the load cell from the engine to the retarder. Build a dyno like you normally build a dyno like this. We're going to give this a second chance though. I haven't been able to read most of the comments yet this time either, but I've read some. And I saw a Softia suggesting to rubber mount this somehow, at least at one end, to dampen some of the vibrations. Seems like a good idea. The reason I haven't done that is I was afraid it would mess with the readings. But thinking about it, it probably won't. As long as the rubber is stiff enough to not bend forever. And it will be. A Softia also pointed out that my dyno probably wasn't stiff enough, and that it thought that the vibrations wasn't coming from the engine and the imbalance in the crank assembly, but from the rest of the assembly. Regardless of where the imbalance is coming from, there's a major flaw in the design here, as you can see now. The source of all this springiness is because it's not bolted down to the floor in front here, only at the back, which is really stupid. My thought was that stiffness of the whole assembly wouldn't be a problem as the load cell and the engine is so close, like this is isolated from everything else. Well, it's obviously not isolated because when this is going on, the whole engine is bouncing up and down, affecting the readings. Let's bolt the frame down properly up in front here and then see how much of a difference it makes before we remove the engine from the frame. And also Mikki Antonakakis suggested an RC filter on the signal line from the load cell. He's actually suggested that several times. Set it to like 5 Hz to remove lots of nonsense coming into the control box. Quite the difference. There's still some movement, but much better than it was. Let's take the engine out of the frame and have a look at those bearings. Next week will be a little bit amputated garage-wise, because I'm attending a physics conference in Edinburgh. New Directions in Theoretical Physics 4. This to try and quench my thirst for complex problem solving and also really enjoy being the idiot in the room. And this will definitely be the case here. Anyways, this means I'll be traveling, and that means I can take advantage of my longtime partner NordVPN yet again. Log back into Norway and watch stuff that's only available in Norway, not available in the UK. I realize most of you are probably not located in Norway, so here's a better example. You're from the United Kingdom and you've traveled to United States and you want to watch the Hobbit trilogy again. You search for Hobbit. It's not there. Open NordVPN, log back into the United Kingdom, refresh the page and search again. Voila! Not only is NordVPN useful for watching stuff available at home but not where you're traveling to, also the other way around. Not available at home but available not necessarily where you're traveling to but where you're pretending to travel to. Opens up lots of possibilities also for booking cheap flights. NordVPN has over 5,000 servers around the world. There's a bunch of countries to choose from for your watching pleasure. There's a more serious side too. NordVPN creates an encrypted tunnel for your data to travel in, so no one can spy on it and steal your credit card information, passwords, etc. Really useful when you're logging on to public Wi-Fi, like your hotel's Wi-Fi or a restaurant's Wi-Fi. How do you know that's the actual hotel Wi-Fi or restaurant Wi-Fi and not some guy's Wi-Fi set up to steal your stuff? Man in the middle attack. There's several packs to choose from. Standard, NordVPN only, plus NordVPN and NordPass, complete, NordVPN, NordPass and NordLocker. Head to nordvpn.com/twostrokestuffing for a great deal. It's risk-free thanks to a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you, NordVPN. First, notice all the rust on my crankshaft. That's from the methanol. Even though I've been purging the engine every day after I've been performing runs, still corrosion from running methanol. And corrosion from methanol might actually be our problem here. Could be the bearings are worn, but this one has come loose. It's not a press fit anymore. This used to be a press fit, and you can see all the black stuff here. That's an aluminium dust oil emulsion, which isn't the greatest thing to have in your engine. Either this hole wasn't perfectly round and the bearing has worn away the high spots and now it's loose, or it's the methanol that creeped in between the bearing and the case and corroded away some of the aluminium. The bearing has been spinning in the case and also on the crank. It has a sliding fit now. And I did not slip fit this crank. It was not supposed to be a slip fit. I'm running a roller bearing on the other side to have the crank free floating. Less friction when the crank is bending under high RPM. Seems like it's the bearing that's been worn. There's actually a small ridge in here which I can feel. This new bearing is not slip fit on the crank. The big end bearing seems fine. Same with the small end. Crank is fine. It's dirty and rusty though, but fine. I think the roller bearing will be fine after cleaning. I'll have to do something about this side. One option is to use the same kind of bearing and a retention compound to fill in the gap. Another option is to machine the hole larger and use a different kind of bearing with a larger outer diameter. I think we'll go for option A, retention compound first. The seals seem fine and there wasn't that much play from the loose bearing. It doesn't explain why the engine wouldn't run. I actually think the aluminium oil paste shorted out the spark plug. We wouldn't fire. Which might have been a good thing, because otherwise I would have continued testing and it could have been much worse. Well, that's a theory anyway. In my opinion, this mating surface is a little bit too rough, too much tool marks. Obviously I didn't think that last time I assembled. I do now though. This one's done already. Much smoother. This have had ample time to cure now, because I thought I was going to be able to post a video before Christmas, but I wasn't. The last time you saw me, that was like 3 days before Christmas. When that didn't happen, I thought I was going to be able to post a video after Christmas, but before New Year's. And that didn't happen either, because Christmas in Norway is pretty much just a week-long feast. Moving from house to house within the family, stuffing your face along the way. My clothes are actually noticeably tighter now after Christmas. Same procedure as every year. Anyways, we're back in business. We're gonna reassemble and hopefully everything is okay now. And tomorrow we'll do some testing if everything goes to plan. Before we assemble, let's talk a little bit about why I'm running such a huge crankcase volume. This is not part of it though. There was supposed to be a reed valve here for a primary intake, and this was the secondary. Now I'm running this reed valve stand-in instead to take up the room there. Still huge, 390cc with the transfers and the crank in there, obviously. A crude illustration of a two-stroke engine. Say if there's just a silencer connected here, no pipe. Then you need this to work as a pump. You need a piston to pump mixture from down here up into here. Then a smaller crankcase volume is beneficial. Piston can create higher pressure down here. More pressure to move mixture up into the cylinder. With a pipe, a really weird pipe. That's a scaled down version of a pipe. In the power band, the pipe is doing pretty much all the work of transferring mixture from here into here. Pumping action from the piston isn't really needed anymore because the pipe is sucking mixture up from the crankcase into the cylinder. In this case, with a pipe, a high crankcase volume is beneficial. You have a larger volume for the pipe to suck from. You'll get a lower pressure differential when the transfer is open. You'll get a higher pressure differential overall throughout the cycle. That's one benefit of a large crankcase volume. You also need the transfers to deliver mixture in a controlled manner. If you have a small volume and the pipe is sucking like hell, you might end up with a situation where the transfers lose control and you get a lot of short circuiting. On the other side, if the pipe isn't really sucking that hard and the volume is far too large, you can end up with the opposite situation where there's not enough velocity and all the mixture is just flowing into the exhaust, not pushing away exhaust and then doing a loop, you know, the loop scavenging thing. Next benefit, picture the crankcase as a Helmholtz resonator of variable volume. The resonance this is the inlet. The resonance frequency of a Helmholtz resonator depends on the volume and the diameter and length of the intake into the resonator. With a small crankcase volume, the piston moving up and down creates large fluctuations in the resonance frequency in the crankcase because the volume is changing so much. Much smaller fluctuations with a larger volume. Piston doesn't change the volume that much throughout the cycle. Then a quick explanation of why resonance in a two-stroke engine is kind of hard. I'll start at the wrong end, the pipe. That's the pipe. And resonance in the pipe, that's easy. Then you have the cylinder, the transfers, an intake. Bad drawing. What makes figuring out resonance throughout the whole system hard? You have a volume here, the pipe, always connected to atmosphere here, and sometimes connected to this volume here. And that variable volume is sometimes connected to this larger but still variable volume here. And that volume is, in my case with a resonant intake, always connected to atmosphere. If I run a blower, it's always connected to a higher atmosphere. If you run a reed valve, it's just sometimes connected to atmosphere. If you run a rotary valve, same case, sometimes connected to atmosphere. You can see how it's hard to calculate the resonance when you have one large variable volume connected to atmosphere and also connected to a smaller variable volume, but not all the time, just sometimes. And that smaller variable volume is sometimes connected to this large volume, which is always connected to atmosphere. It's not the easiest task. Thank God for Emot. That's a really good simulation software for two-stroke engines. Been a long while since I simulated this engine, but I do remember getting like a nice sine wave in the power band with the resonant intake. Even though I was looking at it and it seems too short, but I think this relatively short intake seems to be better for resonance in simulations than a longer one, which should be better for resonance in the intake. It might be the Helmholtz resonance is more important, and that's why because a shorter intake would work better to get a good Helmholtz frequency. And it's also really hard to tell where the crankcase starts and where the intake ends in this in my design. Anyways, let's assemble and just test it. See how it behaves with a resonant intake. I'm replacing this stiff aluminium mount with this soft rubber mount. I noticed water was seeping out from the cylinder gasket, and I pulled the plug and there was water in the cylinder. There's something leaking, of course. Hooray. I'll have to pull the cylinder and inspect. I'm hoping it's just the base gasket, not between the cylinder halves. I'll use some of this Yama bond to help the gasket seal around the water passage. 5 psi. Seems to be holding just fine. The engine is up to temperature. We're gonna attempt starting it and hopefully it'll run. Will be interesting to see how that resonance intake works. I have the sliding reed valve set to slide out of the wave at 12,500 RPM. And then we'll see what happens. I'm also curious to see if the load cell readings are less erratic now with the frame properly bolted down to the floor and the rubber mount. I am going to install an RC filter on the input from the load cell. I haven't done that yet. I want to see how it behaves before I do that. And I haven't got any suitable capacitors. All I've got is really tiny ones, and then the resistor will become really big, like close to a mega ohm. I don't think that'll work very well. Might though, I don't know. Let's see if it starts, let's see if it runs, and let's see if it can get into the power band and run properly with no intake valve. So that's the experimental part now. No intake valve. Not much of a success there. Seems like fueling is quite a bit off too. I think it will be hard to tune the carburetor for reed operation and resonance operation. With waves moving up and down, it's picking up fuel multiple times through the carb. Unless the intake is super long so that you catch the primary wave, not the third harmonic, which is probably the case here. I haven't got any longer straight stubs, but I'll try with this one. And I promise we'll be back to normal reed operation soon. Unless, of course, this works perfectly now. Not ideal. Let's see how it works. I think we broke the reed valve. Yeah, it's gone. I've replaced the sliding reed valve without a reed valve with the normal reed valve. And I'm using this carb now. Let's see how it behaves. Broken reed valve times 2 today. Lots of reed valves going through this engine lately. It's tempting to machine up a rotary intake valve. Should suit this engine design very well. It's easy to fall back into old habits of experimental stuff. I have to keep reminding myself of what the current goal is and try not to stray from it. Make sure the design is sound from the bottom up. Go from minimum experimental to maximum experimental, not straight to maximum experimental. I've made some notes to keep track of my thoughts about options for the way forward. All of these options are on gas for now to take the nitromethanol out of the equation. Option 1, run the same reed block as we've been testing for a while now. Install new pedals. This doesn't really fit the engine though. There's a huge step between the engine and the reed block. And this can be a variable causing trouble with fuel puddling and stuff like that. And also reed valves don't like high case volume. Might be the opening time gets delayed in the cycle and it causes some kind of a weird resonance. The engine wasn't designed for running reeds. Using a reed valve won't really confirm the design. Option 2, continue testing with the sliding reed valve and the resonance intake. Experimental, but what it was designed for. Alternatively, reinstall the primary intake reed and carb and run a sliding valve, not a sliding reed valve. 2 carbs, one for reed operation, one for resonance operation. Should make carb tuning easier. It probably needs to be different for reed operation and resonance operation because of the pulses. Option 2.5, install rotary valve instead of the reed valve. This is closer to what the engine was designed for. No delay in opening times and stuff. Still no resonance for higher pressure. Option 2.6, install rotary valve plus long intake for resonance. Combine the two. This will separate the intake resonance from the case resonance, which could be good or bad. I'm not quite sure. A downside is the complicated drive mechanism. I could use belt drive, bring the belt over the edge like this, like you've probably seen on some engines. Or I could use a bevel drive arrangement. Adds complexity and parts that can break, and friction. I've mixed up my notes here. A continuation of point 2, the sliding reed valve or primary carb plus secondary carb and just a sliding valve. Hard to troubleshoot, many variables, unknowns, which is not what we're going for at the moment. Option 3, reinstall blower and run an air bleed valve to keep it out of surge all the time. Bonus, pipe that air bleed back in before the blower. The blower doesn't care about absolute pressure, only pressure differentials. This means we could run much higher pressure. Would need an intercooler to not cook the blower. Would need a clever reed valve arrangement to keep the pressure contained before the blower, not spilling out through the intake. And some clever control circuitry to keep airflow and pressure within the optimal range. Kind of a compound compressor setup with just one compressor. Would gain back some efficiency versus just running an air bleed. Experimental though, and that's not what we're going for now. Option 4, make new cases with normal volume and a normal reed valve and test the pipe and cylinder separately before we add in large case volume, resonant intakes, blowers, all that. That's the most sensible option. There are several other options more appealing to me though, but that's the urge I'm trying to fend off at the moment. Keep things simple, start at the bottom. Minimum experimental to maximum, not straight to maximum. Even though maximum is more interesting. I'll have to think about it till the next video. And I'm hoping my trip to Edinburgh for that physics conference will help quench my thirst for difficult stuff and complex problems. Yeah, see you next time.